Shalia Stafford is the founder of Flipping the Script, a digital leadership strategy firm for conscious professionals. She takes us on her journey to break her family's history of generational poverty and neglect with self-awareness and leadership skills from a young age to today. So let's go ahead and start out with Shalia Stafford. Welcome, Shalia.
When I was 8 years old, I witnessed my drug-addicted father attempt to murder my mother in front of me. And I made the 911 call that would not only go on to incarcerate him, but to begin my mother's journey as a single mother to 5 kids. This was the night that I learned leadership lessons that I will never forget. Today, I am a quote-unquote leader because of my profession as a sales leadership executive, where for the past 12 years, I have led sales teams across the nation. You're a leader as well, regardless of your title. But I don't blame you if that leaves you with more questions than answers. Leading our success in a healthy way is tough because within each of our stories, guaranteed challenges. And regardless of how big those challenges are or how small they are, they will leave us with one of two options on a path to follow. A path that serves our growth or one that hinders it. And each has its own set of strategies. In a world of gurus, the last thing that we need is another surface level approach that sugarcoats the hard parts of our success, leads into the illusion of being a perfect leader. What I want to do today is take you on a journey beyond the surface level and beyond the titles, because it is beyond the titles where we find the story of our leadership. The story that you are creating is your leadership. How you respond to life is your leadership strategy. And together, they will define how you experience life and the impact that you create. Now, whether you're leading with an effective strategy or you're a leader worth following can all be debated, but not the fact that you're a leader. So how do we lead our strategies and our stories in alignment when it feels like the wheels are falling off? Understanding this complexity has always been an area of curiosity for me, not because of my profession, but as a matter of survival. It became clear that night that I was sitting in my pajamas in the cold police station, awaiting to give my statement, that there was a story behind the strategy that was used to create this impact. My dad was unaware of the story he was leading, a story that constantly was telling him that he wasn't enough. And in order to suppress and numb and prolong the reality of what he was feeling, he chose drugs as his coping strategy because he was in pain, but he wasn't the only one in pain. My entire family was suffering. My sister, who had 16, became pregnant and left the house to raise her baby. My brother, who had 14, was incarcerated. And my mother, who at 15 was forced to wed before her time. We're all suffering. And as much as I wanted to take their pain away and change the history of their stories, I knew that I couldn't. But I could make it count. And it was that night that I made a vow to break the generational cycle of poverty, neglect, and fixed mindsets that plagued our generation for years. I didn't want our pain to be in vain. Another broken family with another single mother, another statistic, a story lost in time. The first thing that I had to do was to make peace with my reality and the story that I was in. And I chose to detach myself from the fantasy of what I wanted my parents to be. Understand that due to the experiences that shaped them, they would never be the parents that the storybook said for me. And they would never be able to give us what they didn't have, the strategies to evolve. And if their experiences had shaped them, then this experience was shaping me. And I had to be careful what lens I chose to filter this experience, or the pain would succumb me and I would be lost. So I set out to conquer what would be a lifelong journey of new experiences and new challenges to flip the script on my story. And I achieved many firsts in my family. At 18, I became the first in my family to graduate high school and then college. At 18, I was leading a $500,000 medical practice. And by 23, I took on the C-suite where I was making six figures. And I became the first female Latina millennial executive to sit at a table of men at a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical organization. And while the heights were exciting and my career skyrocketed, this is the Pinterest version of my story. The in-between moments and the reality of what that meant for me was terrifying. You see, I never felt ready, experienced, or confident enough to measure up to any of the roles that I took on. At 9 years, I took on the role of babysitter to my younger brother after school. And one afternoon, he came up to me and he was crying because he was hungry. And the despair kicked in when I opened the fridge to only find a carton of eggs. And unsure of what to do, I called my grandmother, who told me to roll up my sleeves, pull a chair up to the stove, and through the phone, she taught me how to cook my first scrambled egg. And it was so indescribable, the amount of pride that I felt for providing a meal, that I was ready to take on America's Next Top Chef. However, when it was time for me to find my place in the workforce, I started to feel the fear, the doubt, and the uncertainty creep back in and battle test the story that I was creating. Even though I had begun working when I was 12 years old, when I got my first official job at 15 at a restaurant, when I went to apply, I was so terrified that I couldn't even bring myself to get out the car. And I wanted to quit every time and surrender to what felt like a constant internal battle with the familiar tune that was telling me I wasn't enough. However, in the backseat of my car was my infant son. You see, eventually the cycle caught up to me, and at 15, I became a mother. And I knew in that moment, if I resisted trying something new that served my growth, that I was choosing a strategy that would make my son a statistic. And I wasn't going to numb or suppress my growth. As awkward as it felt, I walked into that restaurant with my baby on my hip. And while the manager held him, I applied for the job, and I got it. Throughout my journey, I learned that there is a discomfort to doing the things that serve our growth and a discomfort to playing small. Regardless, the discomfort doesn't go away. So I hijack my discomfort to work for me. And if it meant that I was trying something new that was serving my growth, then I chose to feel the discomfort that came with it. Because in feeling it, I knew that I was in alignment to the story that I was creating that would go on to change the path for the generations to follow. In life, this strategy helped me plunge into the cold water every time that I resisted. Down the road, I looked up to find myself living the story that I created as an 8-year-old girl. And as my future self sits here, I can't help but think about your stories and the impact that you can create in the world. The 8-year-old girl in me challenges you as a leader to explore the story that you are creating and engage your challenges with the strategies that will evolve your leadership. And as you set out to conquer new experiences and new chapters in life, I want to leave this strategy. Choose your discomforts wisely. Embrace every awkward, uncomfortable, heart-beating, palm-sweating moment that serves your growth to flip the script on your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalia. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your story.